Release the criminal and I'll tell you who the real culprit is. Everyone laughed in the courtroom. Until they learned the truth. The gavel echoed through the packed courtroom like a death sentence. The defendant will rise for the verdict. Marcus Chen, 34 years old, stood up slowly. His public defender didn't even look at him. The prosecutor smiled, already savoring victory. In the gallery, a woman in an expensive silk suit adjusted her pearl necklace, her lips curving into something that wasn't quite a smile. Mr. Chen, you've been found guilty of embezzling $2.3 million from Hartwell and Associates. Do you have anything to say before sentencing? Marcus's hands trembled slightly as he gripped the table. For 3 months, he'd watched his life unravel, his reputation destroyed, his fiancée leaving him, former colleagues crossing the street to avoid him. All because of numbers that appeared in an account he'd never opened. Your Honor, I didn't. Save it, interrupted Judge Morrison, adjusting her glasses with visible irritation. The evidence is overwhelming. Bank transfers, email confirmations, even security footage. Did you really think you could steal from one of the city's most prestigious law firms and just walk away? In the front row, Victoria Hartwell, senior partner and the firm's untouchable queen, watched with the cold satisfaction of someone who just won a chess game. Her designer heels clicked softly as she crossed her legs, diamonds glinting on her wrist. What no one in that courtroom knew was that Marcus had spent the last 2 months doing something far more valuable than preparing a defense. He'd been collecting pieces of a puzzle that would transform him from accused thief into the man who'd expose the biggest fraud scheme in the city's legal history. But first, he had to let them think they'd won. 20 years, the judge declared. Federal prison. Court adjourned. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Reporters frantically typed on their phones. Victoria stood, smoothing her suit with the practiced elegance of someone who'd just eliminated an inconvenient problem. As guards approached to escort Marcus away, he did something unexpected. He smiled. Not a defeated smile. Not a bitter one. But the kind of smile that belongs to someone holding a royal flush while everyone else celebrates their pears. Your Honor, Marcus said calmly, his voice cutting through the noise. Before your guards take me, you might want to see what I sent to your personal email about 3 minutes ago. The judge frowned. Victoria froze mid-step, her confident expression flickering for just a fraction of a second, barely noticeable unless you were watching for it. Mr. Chen, this court doesn't appreciate theatrical. Check your email, Your Honor. Subject line, The Real Hartwell and Associates Ledger. The prosecutor laughed nervously. This is a desperate stunt, Judge Morrison. The defendant is clearly. But Judge Morrison was already reaching for her phone. Her face went pale as she opened the attachment. The silence that followed was suffocating. When she looked up, her eyes had changed completely. Bailiff, she said slowly, no one leaves this courtroom. And someone get me federal prosecutors on the line. Now. Victoria's perfect composure cracked. Just a little. Just enough. Marcus had spent 63 days pretending to be a broken man while secretly becoming a hunter. And now, the real trial was about to begin. If you're enjoying this story of calculated justice, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because what happens next will redefine everything you thought you knew about revenge. The courtroom transformed from orderly procedure into controlled chaos within seconds. Judge Morrison's hands shook as she scrolled through the documents on her phone, her face shifting from disbelief to cold fury. Ms. Hartwell, the judge said quietly, her voice carrying more weight than any shout could. I suggest you sit back down. Victoria remained standing, her jaw clenched. Your Honor, whatever fabricated documents this convicted criminal has manufactured. Fabricated. Judge Morrison's voice cut like a blade. These are certified bank statements from the Cayman Islands. Offshore accounts. Wire transfers dating back 7 years. All bearing digital signatures that match yours perfectly. The prosecutor's confident smirk evaporated. He glanced at Victoria, then at his files, suddenly uncertain which side of history he was standing on. Marcus watched it all unfold with an eerie calm. 3 months ago, when the FBI first raided his apartment at 6 a.m., he'd been genuinely confused. The evidence against him had been overwhelming, too overwhelming. Every transaction perfectly documented, every email meticulously saved, every security camera angle capturing him at precisely the right moment. That's when he'd realized, Someone had spent years building this frame. And that level of detail required something most criminals lacked: access, time, and absolute confidence that they'd never be caught. "Mr. Chen," the judge said, her tone completely different now, "I'm suspending this verdict pending further investigation." "Bailiff, remove Mr. Chen's restraints." The metallic click of handcuffs opening felt like vindication, but Marcus knew this was just the beginning. As circulation returned to his wrists, he finally allowed himself to look directly at Victoria. She stared back, and for the first time, he saw something behind those cold eyes: fear. "Your Honor," Victoria's lawyer, a silver-haired man who'd remained silent until now, stood abruptly. "My client invokes her right to legal counsel before answering any questions." "Oh, she'll need more than counsel," Marcus said softly, speaking for the first time with his real voice, not the defeated monotone he'd performed for months. "She'll need a miracle." Judge Morrison pointed at Victoria. "Ms. Hartwell, you're ordered to remain in this jurisdiction. Surrender your passport to the bailiff immediately." Victoria's face flushed red. "This is outrageous. I'm a senior partner at one of the most respected—" "You're a suspect in a federal fraud investigation," the judge interrupted. "And if even half of what I'm reading here is accurate, you're facing charges that make Mr. Chen's alleged crimes look like petty theft." The gallery erupted. Reporters shoved toward the front. Cameras flashed despite the bailiff's protests. Marcus remained seated, watching Victoria's world crack apart in real time. He thought about the past 3 months, the sleepless nights in his cramped apartment, the former colleagues who'd blocked his calls, his mother crying on the phone asking how her son could have done such things. But he also thought about something else. Something he discovered on day 47 of his investigation, when he'd finally hacked into the firm's archived email server using credentials he'd memorized years ago during a system upgrade. Victoria hadn't acted alone. "Your Honor," Marcus said, standing slowly. "With respect, Ms. Hartwell is just one piece of this. The documents I sent you show a network. She had help, someone inside the firm's IT department who could manipulate security footage, and someone in accounting who could create phantom transactions." Victoria's eyes widened almost imperceptibly. That micro-expression told Marcus everything. She hadn't expected him to know about the others. The prosecutor cleared his throat nervously. "Your Honor, perhaps we should continue this in chambers." "No," Judge Morrison said firmly. "Mr. Chen has been publicly humiliated for 3 months. Whatever happens next happens in open court where everyone can see it." She turned to Marcus. "You have names." Marcus pulled a folded paper from his jacket pocket, the same jacket he'd worn to his own conviction, now feeling like armor instead of a death shroud. "David Park, Senior IT Administrator. Jennifer Walsh, Accounting Supervisor. And—" He paused, letting the tension build, Assistant District Attorney Richard Brennan. The prosecutor went white. That's my boss." "I know," Marcus said quietly. "Which is why this case should have never come to trial in the first place. ADA Brennan made sure it did. He buried exculpatory evidence, coached witnesses, even falsified chain of custody documents." The courtroom exploded into pandemonium. Judge Morrison slammed her gavel repeatedly. "Order! Order!" Victoria sank into her chair, her perfect posture finally collapsing. Her lawyer whispered frantically in her ear, but she didn't seem to hear him. She was staring at Marcus with something between hatred and disbelief. How had the man she'd so carefully destroyed managed to destroy her back? The answer was simpler than she'd ever imagined. She'd underestimated the value of patience, and overestimated the loyalty of accomplices who were only in it for money. What Victoria Hartwell didn't know was that Marcus Chen's real investigation had started 63 days earlier, in the most unlikely place, a prison library. After his arrest, Marcus had been granted bail, partially because his public defender, despite being overworked, had noticed inconsistencies in the prosecution's timeline. Those 2 months of freedom before trial had been Marcus's hunting season. Day 1, he'd made a list. Not of evidence he needed to find, but of people who'd know where to look. People Victoria had damaged before him. James Liu had been a junior associate at Hartwell and Associates 3 years ago. Brilliant kid, Harvard Law, destined for partner. Then suddenly, fired for inappropriate conduct with a client. No charges filed, Just a ruined reputation and a non-disclosure agreement with a suspiciously large payout. Marcus found him working as a legal consultant from a studio apartment in Brooklyn. When Marcus knocked on his door, James had initially refused to even speak. "Whatever you want, I signed an NDA. I can't help you." "She's doing it again," Marcus had said simply. To me. Same pattern. Frame someone clean, bury them with perfect evidence, walk away untouched. James's hand had frozen on the door. "How much do they say you stole?" $2.3 million. James laughed bitterly. "She accused me of losing a client that cost the firm $1.8 million. Funny how her numbers always sound so precise, isn't it?" He'd opened the door wider. "Come in." That conversation had changed everything. James revealed what his NDA couldn't technically forbid, not facts about his own case, but patterns he'd noticed. "Victoria has a system," James explained, pulling out a personal notebook he'd kept despite the settlement. "She identifies someone useful, promotes them quickly, gives them access to sensitive accounts, then manufactures a crisis. The person gets blamed, fired or arrested, and she gets to absorb their client list plus whatever she's actually embezzling." "How many times has she done this?" "You're number 4 that I know of. But I suspect there are more." Marcus had spent the next 2 weeks tracking down the others. Sophie Martinez, former paralegal, now working retail in Philadelphia. Robert Chong, ex-accountant, driving for a rideshare company in Boston. Each one had the same story: rapid promotion, sudden access, devastating accusation, ironclad evidence. And each one had been too scared, too broke, or too broken to fight back. But Sophie had given him something precious. "I saved emails. I know I wasn't supposed to, but something felt wrong from the start. They're on a hard drive in my closet. If they help you, take them." Those emails had been the first domino. They showed Victoria instructing Sophie to create temporary accounts for client confidentiality, accounts that Sophie later discovered were being used to funnel money offshore. When Sophie had questioned it, she'd been fired within a week and threatened with prosecution for the very crimes Victoria was committing. Robert had provided something even better: access codes. "I memorized the master password for the firm's archive server before they fired me," he'd admitted. "Stupid, maybe. But I knew someday someone would need it." With that password, Marcus had spent 36 hours straight downloading 7 years of internal communications, financial records, and security logs. The sheer volume of data had been overwhelming, but patterns emerged. Victoria's requests for special audits, her private meetings with IT Administrator David Park, her lunches with ADA Brennan that coincided perfectly with cases being dropped or prosecutions being fast-tracked. The real breakthrough came when Marcus discovered Victoria's fatal flaw: arrogance. She'd kept everything. Every fraudulent transfer, every manipulated document, every email coordinating with her accomplices. She'd organized it all in a private folder on the firm's server labeled estate planning, apparently confident that no one would ever look, and that if they did, the innocuous name would deflect suspicion. Marcus had found it on day 54. Inside were spreadsheets tracking her real income versus her reported income. The difference? $12 million over 7 years. But having evidence wasn't enough. Marcus needed it to be undeniable. So he'd done something risky. He'd hired a forensic accountant under a fake name, paid in cash, and had every document verified, certified, and time-stamped by a third-party digital notary service. Then he'd waited. Waited through his trial. Waited through his conviction. Waited until the exact moment when Victoria would feel most secure, most untouchable, most certain that she'd won. Because Marcus understood something about revenge that Victoria never had. The sweetest justice isn't catching someone in the act, it's letting them celebrate their victory right before you burn their world down. Now, standing in that courtroom watching Victoria's lawyer frantically whisper damage control strategies, Marcus allowed himself a small smile. The hunter had become the hunted, and she was only just beginning to understand the size of the trap. Judge Morrison's voice cut through his thoughts. "Mr. Chen, I'm ordering a full forensic audit of Hartwell and Associates. You'll need to provide all your evidence to federal investigators." "Already done, Your Honor," Marcus replied. "I sent copies to the FBI, the IRS, and the State Bar Association approximately 4 minutes ago." Victoria's face went from red to ashen. Her carefully constructed empire was crumbling, and everyone in the courtroom could see the exact moment she realized there was no way out. The three federal agents entered the courtroom with the kind of quiet authority that makes even innocent people nervous. The lead agent, a woman in her 40s with steel-gray eyes, walked directly to Judge Morrison and handed her a sealed envelope. "Your Honor, FBI. We've been investigating Hartwell and Associates for 18 months. Mr. Chen's evidence just connected the final pieces." Victoria's lawyer shot to his feet. "Your Honor, my client has rights." "Your client has been stealing from her own firm, her clients, and the federal government," the agent interrupted coldly. She turned to face the gallery, her voice carrying to every corner of the room. "Ms. Victoria Hartwell, you're under arrest for wire fraud, money laundering, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to commit fraud." The courtroom erupted. Victoria stood frozen as agents approached her, handcuffs gleaming under the fluorescent lights. For the first time since Marcus had known her, she looked truly small. "This is a mistake," Victoria said, her voice shaking. "I built that firm. I made it what it is. You can't just." "You made it a criminal enterprise," the agent replied. "Cuff her." As the metal clicked around Victoria's wrists, the same sound Marcus had heard 3 months ago, he watched her face cycle through denial, rage, and finally, something close to panic. She looked at Marcus, her eyes wild. "You don't understand what you've done," she hissed. "The people I work with, the connections I have." "Had," Marcus corrected quietly. Past tense. The lead agent pulled out her phone, showing Judge Morrison something on the screen. The judge's eyebrows rose. "Is this confirmed?" "As of 20 minutes ago. We arrested David Park at his home and Jennifer Walsh at the firm. Both are cooperating. And Ada Brennan." The agent paused. "He's been placed on administrative leave pending criminal charges." The prosecutor in the room looked like he might be sick. His entire office was about to be investigated because his boss had been bought. But Marcus wasn't finished. "Your Honor, there's one more thing. Victoria didn't just steal money. She destroyed lives systematically. James Liu, Sophie Martinez, Robert Chong, people whose careers and reputations she demolished to cover her tracks. They deserve restitution." Judge Morrison nodded slowly. "The court will ensure victims are compensated. Mr. Chen, given the extraordinary circumstances, your conviction is hereby vacated. All charges dismissed. Furthermore," she looked directly at Victoria, "I'm recommending you be held without bail. You've demonstrated sophisticated criminal behavior, unlimited resources, and a complete disregard for the legal system you claim to serve." Victoria's legs seemed to buckle slightly. Her lawyer caught her arm, but she jerked away from him, her composure finally shattered completely. "I gave everything to that firm. Everything. And she pointed at Marcus with trembling hands, he was nobody. A mid-level forensic accountant who should have been grateful I even noticed him." "You noticed me because I was convenient," Marcus said, his voice steady. "You needed someone clean, someone trustworthy, someone whose downfall would be believable. But you made 2 mistakes, Victoria." She glared at him, mascara starting to smudge from tears she was too proud to acknowledge. "First, you assumed I'd break like the others. That I'd take a plea deal, disappear quietly, and let you win." Marcus took a step closer. "Second, and this is the important one, you kept records of everything because you're a narcissist who couldn't resist documenting your own brilliance. That folder labeled, estate planning? $12 million in theft, all meticulously organized. You built your own prison, Victoria. I just found the key." The color drained from her face. She hadn't known he'd found that folder. In her mind, it had been perfectly hidden, perfectly safe. "How did you?" She whispered. "Robert Chong. The accountant you framed 3 years ago?" He remembered the master password. "Turns out people you destroy don't forget as easily as you hoped." Victoria's lawyer was scribbling notes frantically, already planning appeals that everyone in the room knew were futile. The evidence was overwhelming, authenticated, and most damning of all, created by Victoria herself. As agents began escorting her toward the exit, Victoria stopped and turned back to Marcus one final time. Her expression had shifted from panic to something uglier, pure hatred. "You self-righteous bastard," she spat. "You think you're a hero? You're just another bitter man who couldn't handle working for someone more successful than him. Marcus met her gaze calmly. I wasn't bitter when I worked for you, Victoria. I was actually good at my job. But you taught me something valuable over these past 3 months. The difference between success and theft is whether you can sleep at night. How have you been sleeping? The question hung in the air. Victoria had no answer. The agents guided her through the courtroom doors, her expensive heels clicking one last time against marble floors that would never feel her presence again. Judge Morrison exhaled slowly, as if releasing months of tension. Mr. Chen, on behalf of this court, I apologize. The system failed you spectacularly. The system was corrupted, Your Honor, Marcus replied. But it also gave me the time I needed to expose the truth. Sometimes justice is just patient revenge. In the gallery, James Liu sat quietly crying. Sophie Martinez, who'd driven 4 hours to attend, covered her mouth with shaking hands. Robert Chong simply nodded, a weight visibly lifting from shoulders that had carried shame for too long. The prosecutor approached Marcus hesitantly. For what it's worth. I genuinely believed the evidence. I had no idea Brennan was involved. Neither did I, until I found the email showing him coaching Victoria on which charges would stick best. Marcus's voice wasn't cruel, just factual. You might want to review every case Brennan supervised in the last 5 years. I'm guessing mine wasn't the only one he manipulated. The prosecutor's face went pale as the implications sank in. Dozens, maybe hundreds of cases potentially tainted. 6 months later, Marcus stood in front of floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise paint the skyline gold. His new office wasn't as large as Victoria's had been, but it was honest. Behind him, the brass nameplate on the door read, Chen and Associates Forensic Fraud Investigation. James Liu knocked softly before entering. Morning, boss. We got 3 new client requests yesterday. All from firms wanting to audit their own systems before someone like Victoria happens to them. Marcus smiled. Fear makes better clients than trust ever did. James set down a folder. You'll want to see this. Victoria's sentencing is today. 22 years federal prison, full restitution ordered. Park got 15, Walsh got 12, and Brennan. He paused, 18 years plus disbarment. Marcus picked up the folder, but didn't open it. Part of him had expected to feel triumph at this moment, vindication, maybe even joy. Instead, he felt something quieter. Relief, perhaps. Or simply closure. The victim's fund cleared, James continued. Sophie gets her house back. Robert's record was expunged. And that junior associate Victoria framed in 2019? She just got hired by a federal prosecutor's office. Clean slate. Good. Marcus set down the folder. That's what this was actually about. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, you destroyed my life. Victoria. James saw his expression change. Her. Marcus typed back slowly, no. You destroyed 4 lives building your empire. I just returned the favor. The difference is, my revenge was legal. He blocked the number. Some conversations didn't deserve continuation. The morning news played softly on the office TV. A reporter stood outside the courthouse. The Hartwell fraud case has sent shockwaves through the legal community. What started as a seemingly simple embezzlement has exposed corruption at the highest levels. Marcus Chen, the man wrongly convicted, has become a symbol of perseverance and strategic justice. Marcus turned it off. He didn't need to be a symbol. He just needed to be free. Sophie Martinez arrived an hour later for her new job interview. Marcus had offered her a position as a senior investigator. When she walked in, she looked different. Confident. Unburdened. I never thought I'd work in law again, she admitted, sitting across from him. After what happened, I assumed that door was closed forever. Victoria closed a door, Marcus replied. But she didn't burn down the whole building. You're talented, Sophie. You were just working for the wrong person. She smiled, and it reached her eyes this time. So were you. Yeah, Marcus agreed. But I learned something valuable from her. Documentation is everything. She kept records of her crimes because she was arrogant. I kept records of my investigation because I was desperate. Turns out, both approaches lead to truth eventually, just with very different outcomes. By afternoon, Robert Chong stopped by unannounced, carrying a bottle of expensive scotch. Figured we should celebrate properly. The three of us who actually fought back. They sat in Marcus's office, Marcus, James, and Robert, three people who'd been broken by the same woman and rebuilt themselves into something stronger. To Victoria, Robert said, raising his glass with dark humor. Who taught us that the best revenge isn't getting even? It's getting better. They drank in silence, each lost in thoughts of what they'd lost and what they'd found. James finally spoke. You know what the crazy part is? She could have just been good at her job. She was smart enough, connected enough. She didn't need to steal. Some people can't separate success from domination, Marcus observed. Victoria didn't just want to win. She wanted others to lose. That was her fatal flaw. Robert nodded. She treated people like obstacles instead of humans. Eventually, those obstacles became witnesses. Marcus thought about the night he'd been arrested, agents tearing through his apartment while neighbors watched from doorways. He thought about his mother's voice breaking on the phone, his fiancée's text message ending their engagement with brutal efficiency. I can't be with someone like you. He'd lost almost everything. But in losing it, he discovered something Victoria never had, resilience born from necessity rather than privilege. His phone rang. The federal agent from the trial. Mr. Chen? Thought you'd want to know, we've identified 6 additional victims from Victoria's schemes going back 9 years. Your evidence helped us build cases that were previously impossible to prosecute. Marcus exhaled slowly. Good. They deserve justice too. More than that, the agent continued, the legal community is implementing new oversight protocols because of this case. Anonymous reporting systems, mandatory external audits, rotation of ADA assignments. You changed more than just your own situation. After hanging up, Marcus stood again at the window. The city looked the same as it had 6 months ago, but his view of it had transformed completely. He wasn't naive anymore. He understood now how easily systems could be corrupted, how power protected power, how truth could be buried under enough paperwork and confidence. But he also understood something more important. Truth doesn't stay buried. It waits. It gathers strength in darkness. And when it finally breaks through, it's unstoppable. Victoria had taught him to be meticulous, patient, strategic. She'd meant to destroy him with those qualities, but instead, she'd armed him. The irony was almost poetic. As sunset approached, Marcus typed an email to all his former colleagues at Hartwell and Associates, the ones who'd ghosted him during the trial. He kept it brief. No hard feelings. You did what you thought was right with the information you had. But next time someone's accused, maybe ask questions before assuming guilt. The truth is usually more complicated than it looks. He hit send and closed his laptop. James appeared in the doorway. Heading home. Yeah. Got dinner with my mom. First time in months, she won't spend the meal crying. That's good, man. Really good. James paused. You think Victoria understands yet? What she lost? Marcus considered the question carefully. Maybe. Or maybe she'll spend 22 years convinced she was the victim. Some people never learn. But that's not my problem anymore. Walking out of his office that evening, Marcus passed the bronze nameplate one more time. Chen and Associates. Built not on theft or manipulation, but on the simple principle that truth, however buried, always finds its way to light. Victoria Hartwell had tried to break him. Instead, she'd forged him into something she could never be, someone who won without destroying others in the process. And that, Marcus realized, was the only victory that actually mattered. If this story reminded you that patience and truth are more powerful than position and lies, subscribe to see more stories of people who refused to stay down when the world tried to bury them. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, it's building something so authentic that your enemy's fake empires crumble just by comparison.